Welcome, Cheryl, and the Orrick team and Diversity Lab. Hello, hello. So I'm Monica Phillips. I'm the Director of Learning Content and DEIB at ChIPs, the nonprofit advancing women in tech law and policy. And we're absolutely thrilled to be partnering with Diversity Lab on the honor roll and this opportunity to recognize these 5 outstanding law firms that are really moving the needle. I'm part of the Diversity Labs language, moving the needle to make a difference. So today we have Sheryl Garko, who's a partner at Orrick. She's an experienced trial lawyer who focuses on high-stakes intellectual property litigation. She has extensive courtroom experience and working knowledge of a wide range of technologies. Sheryl is the global chair of Orrick's Women's Initiative and serves on the firm's management committee. Over the course of her career, she has represented clients ranging from Fortune 50 companies to startups in trademark, copyright, false advertising, and trade secret litigations and at trial. She has worked with leading tech companies and some of the most recognizable brands in the world, like New Balance, Samsung, and Microsoft. She has tried cases to both judges and juries in federal courts across the United States and is experienced practicing before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's Trademark Trial and Appeal Board and the International Trade Commission. Through her trial work, she has developed deep expertise in litigating novel and complex damages issues in IP cases and leveraging survey work. So she definitely knows her stuff. She knows that experience of moving up as a woman in the legal industry. She's has so many awards. Cheryl, I don't know if I can say all of these, but just a few is that you've received awards for Women Worth Watching by Profiles in Diversity Journal. Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly named you one of the top women of law, and you received an award for leadership excellence from the National Diversity Council. And after having the pleasure of talking with you about this, I know how much you care about making a difference and really shaping the legal industry to do even better. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start right into it. Tell us, so Orrick has been recognized by ChIPs and Diversity Lab for excellence in gender inclusion. What have you done to reach this honor?
So I think there's a really holistic approach that Orrick takes to thinking about diversity and really incorporating diversity into all aspects of what we do within the firm. And I think that really sets us apart and allows us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve, because for us, diversity isn't a siloed thing. It's not, there's one group thinking about this and one group focused on it. Rather, across all of our lanes, and we think about it in terms of clients, community, and talent, diversity is, and our approaches to diversity are ingrained across all of those different aspects of what our business is and what our business does. And so I think that really aids us in being able to advance our diversity goals. I think the other thing that Orrick really does well is we're very focused on measurable goals. Setting a goal, setting it based around metrics that we can look at, that we can assess, whether it's a year, 3 years, 5 years down the line, and see how we're doing, to actually benchmark and say, is what we're doing working? And so I think incorporating those types of approaches has really helped us be successful.
I'm really impressed by the high numbers of women that Orrick has across the firm. Women comprise more than 30% of the equity partnership, ranking Orrick number 7 among 600 plus lawyer firms. And you have representation of women at the top too, with board and management committee being 50% diverse, including 9 women. Tell us about the distributed leadership model that allows women to thrive at Orrick.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity that's given for women to step into leadership roles, and a lot of focus on making sure that we have a diverse set of voices throughout leadership. I think Orrick recognizes that we make better decisions when we have more voices at the table and more voices coming from different perspectives. And that comes from the top, from our chairman, from Mitch, who any of you have met or worked with, is wonderful and is very, very focused on diversity issues. So he really sets the tone in thinking about what our leadership should look like and how it should mirror our firm and what it looks like and what we want it to look like in terms of our leadership. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that's created for women to step into those positions. And we do really focus on ensuring that we have that diversity. You know, it doesn't necessarily happen by accident, right? You have to pay attention to what's going on and looking at your numbers and looking at, does your leadership board reflect what the rest of your firm looks like, and ensuring that that's happening. And so I think Orrick has lots of opportunities for that to occur. And there's lots of opportunities for women to move up through the leadership ranks as well. So you're talking about the highest levels of leadership at the very top, but that starts with also building leaders in other leadership positions as well, whether it's office leaders or practice group leaders, or all of those places that leadership comes more naturally to some folks than others. And it's a skill that you have to learn across the course of your career. So I think creating those opportunities for women to have leadership roles in all different walks, so that you can then effectively lead through the higher positions, I think is really important as well, because it oftentimes isn't effective to just put people in senior leadership roles for the sake of putting them in senior leadership roles. You need to put people who are capable in those roles, and ensuring that you have the right training throughout and are training people to lead, I think is really important as well. And I think that's part of what Orrick does really, really well, in having a lot of opportunities to lead, whether it's a committee or something locally based, so you can gain those skills and have them so you can continue into higher and higher leadership roles in the firm.
Tell us a little bit more about some of those pathways that the firm has created and what you're doing specifically to train women to get from associate to executive committee.
So I think there's lots of formal and informal training. I think that goes on within the firm, right? I think we have in place some very strong mentoring and sponsorship networks and formal policies in terms of ensuring that folks are not just on this journey alone, right? That we are ensuring that women have, and all of our diverse attorneys in the firm have, support from the time when they come into the door into the time when they're in senior leadership positions, and recognizing and fostering that talent along the way. Because I think it's hard to say to people, okay, go out and just do this, right? Particularly when you come from law school and you're trained, really to read and write and do the analytical analysis, and you're not necessarily trained to run a business, which is ultimately what being a partner and being a leader in a law firm is. So having those opportunities and having that support and that training consistently along the way from the most junior levels of teaching those managerial skill sets to help women and other diverse attorneys move up through those ranks and have the support along the way as they do that, looking holistically at developing folks and not just looking at, okay, there's one finite skill set we're trying to have people learn here, but rather developing them as a well-rounded lawyer and business person in many ways, so that they can then succeed in the leadership roles as they continue.
What stood out for you in your path that helped you get to where you are?
I think I had a lot of people who were willing to give me a chance, which was great. I think I joined Orrick 4 years ago, about now. And when I came over, I was talking to our chairman and others, and I had some leadership roles in my prior firm. And I said, it's really important to me, particularly with women's issues. And I had expressed that I wanted to be in a leadership position. And I had folks who were willing to help foster that, and was given opportunities pretty early on after joining the firm to lead the women's initiative, and then a year after that to join the management committee. So I think having the support of people who are willing to say, okay, you maybe necessarily haven't held these roles before, but we see potential in you, and supporting that potential, I think has really been instrumental. But I think coupled with that is also a part of it, you have to have a willingness to ask. I think one of the pieces of advice I got when I was very junior that someone said to me that always sticks with me is that you're the only person who will care as much about your career as you do. That everyone else who is, you'll have wonderful sponsors, you'll have wonderful mentors, but at the end of the day, your career is yours and you have to take charge of it. So I think if you want to be in a leadership position, if you want to continue moving up through the the ranks of the firm, to express that and to say, I want to do this, I want in, is an important piece of that too, because it can't always be left up to just someone saying, oh, I think you would be good for this. With some people are interested and some people aren't. So I think part of it is also taking that initiative and control of your career as you move along.
What if you want the leadership position, you haven't had that experience? How do you advocate to get that training? You said the firm provides some of it. What are those opportunities? I imagine it's limited.
So I think at Orrick, at least, I don't think it is that limited to some extent, because I think we do have a lot of opportunities for you to lead a project. That's, some of it starts right within your own teams and demonstrating within cases that you can lead and taking on responsibility that other folks in the firm recognize. But I do think we have a lot of committees, we have a lot of different projects that are going on, and the firm is very receptive to people stepping up and saying, I want to do this, and giving them an opportunity. And so usually it starts on a smaller scale, and then you build your skill set there. I think one of the things we really do pride ourselves is on innovation. So the firm is really open to people coming in and saying, I have a new idea. I'd like to do that. It is very supportive of that. And that those are real opportunities where you can develop leadership skills and develop those skills of even just connecting with others in the firm so that you increase your base of people that you know and can support you in a furthering your goals of leadership. So I think for me, I'm fortunate to be at a firm that is has lots and lots of opportunities. I think more so perhaps than other places, that it's not a, okay, how long have you been here and how long have you been in this position that you now graduate to this next position, as opposed to saying, you look like you could do this, you want to do this, okay, let's try this. And not only are we going to say it's okay to do it, but we're going to give you the resources behind that as well.
It sounds like an amazing culture. And
Yes.
questions
love
on
it.
it, right? Do you create it, or was it inherent in the people who built the firm?
So I certainly didn't create it, but I have benefited from it. I like to think I further it, but part of the reason I came to Orrick was because of the culture and because I felt like it fit with my values in terms of a firm that is very people focused and cares about collaboration and cares about diversity and cares about the human aspect of the folks that work at the firm. And so, and I think that comes, as I said, it comes from the very top. I've had the great fortune of working with people in the board and management committee who are some of the most caring, focused on people that I've ever worked with in my career. And so there's just a great level of humanity amongst the folks that we work with. And it's what drew me to the firm, and it's what keeps me at the firm in terms of that collaborative, supportive environment.
How is it for women of color?
I think obviously I cannot speak personally as I'm not a woman of color, but I know that there's obviously additional struggles. There's an additional layer of issues that always gets added on with respect to to issues of intersectionality. I think we try to be very focused on those issues. I know one thing from the Women's Initiative perspective is we've done more recently to try to collaborate and address the issues that are more unique to women of color as opposed to white women, and give that space and understand I don't know certainly that experience, but try to provide a supportive environment where voices can be heard, that we're trying to listen and be receptive to the feedback that we get. And so, for example, this year we've launched a few new things, and we've added more women of color to our Women's Initiative leadership to try to address those issues, because certainly there is more work to be done across the industry within Orrick with respect to retaining and promoting women of color.
You have a program where it's your Senior Leader Ally Sponsor Program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So for that program, that's one place where we've tried to make one-on-one connections between senior leadership and diverse senior associates to try to help folks really make that jump of not only staying at the firm, but to the promotion to partner, and giving that very curated one-on-one attention to the unique issues to our diverse senior associates. So we essentially take a member of our board or management committee and we pair them with one or more diverse senior associates, and do typically the cadence of meetings is I have a ally sponsoree that I work with, and she is, I have two actually. And so we meet bi-weekly to check in. Sometimes it's just a conversation about how things are going. Sometimes it's, okay, what connections can I make for you? How can I support you in your work? And really trying to give that individualized approach. Because I think one thing that we found is broad-based programs are great, but when it comes to retaining people, individual focus is really what matters at the end of the day, because no two people are alike. Everyone's had a different journey to where they are. Everyone has different goals. Everyone's on a slightly different schedule. So really being able to tailor what the firm is doing to the individual needs of the person are the places where we're more successful. And so that's what, in part, what that ally sponsor program is trying to achieve, is to give that very one-on-one attention to folks, and to have it be a sponsorship relationship, not just a mentoring relationship, right? A place where, you come out and say, and you are advocating for people, and you are advocating for their interests, and, working your internal network and your internal network to support them. Because I think we all to know the difference between, at this point, the discussion between mentor and sponsorship, but we really strive for it to be a sponsorship program, not just a mentorship program.
I love what you said about owning your career and advocating for yourself on that journey. And it's also important to have the sponsor and maybe a mentor and the allies and the friends who are supporting you, who are helping you feel like you belong, who are encouraging you, who are saying, here's how I do it, maybe on the peer level, here's how senior level leaders do it. And everything we've talked about really gives me this sense that the culture is really strong in, like you said, helping people find that individual path to success, because that looks different for everyone. You also have, we've talked about the culture of Orrick being really special and unique, and there are some really great opportunities for advancing women in IP as first chair trial lawyers. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think the firm, kind of keeping with everything else, is that the firm is not a structure of you have to wait your turn necessarily for a number of years of service or anything like that. And I think we see a lot of strong first chair trial lawyers coming out of the IP department, which, as everyone on this call knows, women in IP is even some can be a larger challenge than even some women in certain other practice areas, just given the science backgrounds and all of that, those pieces of it. But I think we create a culture where it is very much driven by wanting to give people opportunities and give people early at bats to build a deep bench of being able to go to clients and say, we have all of these amazing lawyers and all of these amazing diverse lawyers who can first chair your teams. And part of that comes with training, right? People have to give up those first chair opportunities often for someone else to have them to get your first at bat. And so encouraging a culture of doing that, of saying, having folks who are willing to say, I'm going to step back, I want you to step up, is really key in that, because you have to give people and you have to give that next generation the opportunities to be there. Because at least for me, I am not at the point in my career where there's clients calling and saying, I want to give you a $25 million first chair trial case, which would be lovely if my phone just rang like that all the time. But it's dependent on other relationships that I have with other people, and clients that I have, of saying, I want you to step up, I want you to first chair this matter. And having that happen more and more and more, and being able to build those relationships. But it comes from having other folks in the firm be willing to support that as well. And I think that's part of the culture that really helps create that circumstance.
Why is this so hard? Are there particular barriers to gender inclusion in law, especially in IP and tech?
Yeah, I think it's one of the places that I still, as many times as I'm in court, there's still, you can look around sometimes and count the number of women who have speaking roles, who have lead roles. And I think, there's still that holdover that's happened, across generations, and we make progress, right? And then we see steps back. And I know, particularly with the pandemic, women leaving the practice of law and setting us back, there's some studies that said almost a decade with respect to the advancements we made for women. So I think it's a bit of a constant battle that we've been fighting to undo the situation where we, for years and years and years, it was all male trial lawyers and all male first chair trial lawyers. And I think it's still overcoming to some extent. We have, as the generations have gone on, right, you have more women who are earlier on in their career than we had later on in their career. So getting clients comfortable too with, okay, I don't have, well, I'm pretty gray, but I'm not the traditional, white-haired male lawyer that you look to first chair your trial, but having clients who have that confidence in you. And I think it actually has helped immensely. The more women we have in-house, I think has really helped move that along. But it still remains a challenge. And I think it's still, one of the places in the courtroom is where women are still underrepresented. And I think it's, from my perspective, I think it's still just a holdover that we're continuing to improve upon year over year over year. And it's nice. Like, I'm going to trial in the fall with an all women trial team, which is great. And I'm really, really excited to do, but it's still notable, right? That's a thing, as where, when you find 4 men showing up on the signature block, it's not as notable. So hopefully we're getting to the point where that narrative flips and seeing all women trial teams is more of a norm, but there's still work to do, clearly.
I hope so. That will be fantastic. And it's happening. So thank you for leading in that area. How do you think differently about what a career in law looks like?
I mean, I think in terms of, I guess maybe let me ask a clarify question. Differently how?
You said in the honor roll report that we need to think differently about what a career in the law looks like. And I think
I,
it's maybe about what it looks like for how we lead, or how those paths to success are all custom, as you mentioned, really leading to the individual. And then also what we do, the steps we take from A to B. It's not, one diagonal line, it's a lot of twists and turns. And so maybe it's stepping back, maybe it's leaning forward. And while she's not wasn't a law firm partner at this point in her career, one of our ChIPs board members, Dorian Daly, who recently left Oracle as general counsel, she has talked about how she went part-time and then still became general counsel. And so there are these different points where we need to recognize people for their expertise and the skills they bring, and not the hours they work or the hours they bill or the measures that we love to tout through, ALM. I don't want to call anyone out for wrongdoing, but I think those metrics tell just one story.
yeah, I think that's
And
exactly right.
you're telling a very different story in this culture of elevating and advancing women and diversity across Orrick.
Yeah, and I think that's in terms of differently, I think it's exactly right. Like it's less along the traditional path, right? I think there's an old school version of you go from A to B to C, and it's a very linear line. And if you're not following that line, then there's something wrong, versus understanding that that's not going to work for everyone. And many times it doesn't work for most people, or even if it does, you have folks faced with burnout or, leaving the profession, or leaving, big law, at least after a period of time, because it's too much. And so I think the idea of just being open and understanding that everyone's path is different. I think this goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier about this kind of individualized approach, that there are lots of people who are very, very successful who didn't do things that on that very traditional linear path. And I think promoting those people, recognizing those people, telling more of those stories is really important, so that people see, okay, I don't have to do it in this exact way, and I can still get to the place that I want to be, and do the other things that matter to me in my life, of whatever that is. And maybe it's a less traditional path. Maybe it is fewer hours at certain points in your life to make it work for you and work for your career, so that you can stay long-term, that you can keep advancing. And I do think that that's a place where we thinking differently, thinking about this not as, you have to be tied to your desk from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night for years and years and years, and that's the only way to be successful. But I think thinking differently, thinking in an individualized way, and then also telling those stories is important for people just to understand that there is no right or wrong when it comes to how you get to where you get. And we can support success across a variety of different paths, and across a variety of different approaches that people want to take towards their careers.
What stands out to me about what you just said is that it's not the person billing the most hours is not necessarily the person who is also the best at building a team, leading a team, developing the business, running a business, or engaging with clients. And those are all very different skill sets. And I've coached lawyers over the past 25 years, and no one person is good at all of those things. And so when we can each recognize our own strengths, we can create a better, more effective law firm and more engaging law firm.
I think that's exactly right. And I think also being able to set to the side, this is the way I did it, so that's the way to do it. And I think that's some of what we hear echoes of always, right? Of what this is how it was done, and so this is how we shall go forward, as opposed to evolving and thinking differently about, how we can make things better as we move along, and not just do the same things over and over again. And see the same results, which the results we've seen in the past, right, are women leave the profession, women decide to take different paths, and weren't supported in that in a way that enabled them to continue, where we have highly talented lawyers who are easily first chair lawyers, but because they weren't the person billing the most hours. But now I think being able to see that that's not necessarily the path that needs to be followed to be successful.
Anyone who has been involved with or run business operations in a law firm has heard a group of partners say, well, what other law firms are doing that? Because they don't want to be the first. And I'm like, oh, just lean into innovation, right? Isn't that what we're talking about here? IP lawyers are at their core leading in innovation. So this is the opportunity to do it differently, right?
No, it's exactly right. And I think that's one of the great things, like, as I said at Orrick, is we are happy to be ahead of the path. And I think we have some really courageous leaders in our firm and some amazing folks on our talent side and our operations team that are willing to say, you know what, no one else is doing this, but that doesn't mean we should be doing it. Let's look at what our folks need, what's the best way to support them, and how do we think differently about approaching these issues that allows us to keep this really great talent that we have, and that we're not losing them for reasons that are, sometimes somewhat silly in terms of not being able to accommodate schedules in the right way, or not being able to say, okay, yes, for this period of time, this is what's going to work best for you, and we can support you in that. We shouldn't be saying no in those situations where we have really talented people that we want to retain.
So true. So true. We talked a little bit about this. I don't know how much it's true or not, but I was thinking there may be a difference between law firm cultures based on their geographic location. I'm quite sure that's true. And I wonder how much that plays into the retention of creating a diverse workplace.
And I think, so in my limited anecdotal experience, I have found that to be true in terms of I first worked in firms that were more East Coast based. I now work in a firm that is West Coast originated and based. And for me, I think I've seen a difference in just the approach in terms of it, and some of it's client driven in terms of the markets that you're talking about. We work with a lot of startup innovative companies that are more progressive and less traditional in terms of how they approach the workplace. So that allows us to do that too. And I think we can be more on the cutting edge, whereas perhaps sometimes you have more, traditional, very large scale companies that may have more, rigid systems in place that then the client, you have to, meet your client's needs. And so it can be more demanding. And those on the East Coast, there tends to be a bit more of some of those kind of more traditional companies, and then the law firms have followed that. And that was, a bit of my experience in terms of the firms that I've worked with. And I think there is definitely a West Coast vibe that I like, and that is very inclusive and is very, as I said, there's a lot of humanity in how our firm approaches things. And it's, as I said, I have a limited subset of places that I have worked, but I do think that there can be influences because the markets influence and where your clients are located influence. And I think we see some of those differences play out. And for me, having a more West Coast based firm has been a plus.
I think that's really important to note as we look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in law firms, looking at how we connect with others and diversify our networks geographically to help expand the conversation and make it more accessible overall. I believe my work is at the intersection of well-being and DEIB, and I believe you can't have one without the other, that positive, happy places breed this positive force that allows for the DEIB to happen and vice versa. So how does well-being fit into the firm priorities at Orrick?
So I think well-being is a really key priority for Orrick, and I think we see it across a variety of different programs that we've instituted. And again, just that very people-focused approach generally to how we think about the firm. And one of the things that Orrick really prides itself on is we're consistently voted one of the best places to work by Fortune. And that's across all, it's not a law firm specific honor, and it's not a attorney specific honor. So it's very much focused on the company as a whole. And I think, as you just said, happy employees generally make for a better work environment. So for us, that's a really important distinction that we've achieved, because hopefully what it means is that across the firm, across everyone who works there, that we are creating a place where people feel supported and welcome, and that they want to be there on a daily basis. We've also instituted, some specific programs too, very focused on well-being. We have, I think they're monthly programs that we have where we do meditation, and we have a Calm app that the firm has rolled out that you get a free membership to. But I think my favorite well-being program that we have is what's called our Unplugged Time, which is really meant to address wellness and prevent burnout. And so it's intended for folks who are working hard, that you can take a week, 40 hours of time unplugged, and you are meant to totally unplug, to work it out with your teams, to have people support you, and that with your teams. And when I say work it out, as the firm is saying, the teams need to be supportive of this as well, so that we can figure out a week that people can take and they get to bill for that 40 hours. So they don't feel the pressure of, I'm losing out on billable hours because I'm not working, that you get 40 hours of billable credit, but that you're meant to really step away. And that's what the firm encourages, to say, take that time. This isn't the time to answer emails. This is the time for you to refresh and recharge. And I think that's one place we've really been innovative and out in front, and it's gotten a really great reception, and people have been really thankful for it. I've used it. I thought it was amazing. And I think it's, it also shows you that the world is typically not going to fall apart when you leave for a week, and that if you have created collaborative, supportive teams, you can do this. You can have instances where people can take that time away and be able to refresh themselves, recharge themselves, and come back with more energy. Because I think the model of just more and more and more hours just leads to, it's not leading to the best work product. It's not leading to people staying in the profession. So I think that's a place where I think Orrick has really said, really identified wellness as a priority, and ensuring that we're supporting people and being able to take those breaks and have that time to focus on themselves and step away.
So important. Law firms are very competitive. And this even starts in law school. I've done a lot of reports on this. And then our society is very fear-based, right? And so I welcome what you're saying about well-being, and I challenge everyone on this call to find a way to fit this into how you're doing it. One of my favorite techniques is to encourage everyone to integrate this into where you're already showing up. And so many of us find we're on back-to-back Zoom calls. So creating a 1-minute mindfulness moment at the beginning of your team meeting. We had a program for our general counsel boot camp recently. Deb Stolkop at Cisco said that she has a gratitude check-in. Everyone says one thing they're grateful for. This is a technique I use in a lot of the classes I teach. It's so powerful. It just allows everyone, when they're rushing around throughout their busy days, to arrive all in the same place and take a pause, because so often we're reactive instead of just checking in. And it's literally 1 minute. Like you said, Sheryl, it doesn't take a lot of time, but we don't always have that practice of pausing and then seeing each other and then moving forward from there. And that goes so far to what we're talking about here, this DEIB. How you get there is by pausing the reaction and noticing each other's humanity.
Yeah, and I think it is. You're exactly right. It can just take a short amount of time. And we have some internal women's initiatives meetings that we've been doing, that we have, a short reflection time at the beginning to allow you to just get refocused, so that you're not bringing, hopefully, everything that you just, the stressful calls that you may have just come into this discussion, to allow you to be more present, more focused. And that's an example kind of in the women's initiative context, but I think you're exactly right in terms of just, your normal team meeting, of having that moment to reset yourself, to say, okay, what am I focused on? Why am I here? What am I doing? Instead of just carrying energy from another place into it that might not always be the most productive energy, that then influences kind of, your entire day, cascades from there, right? So those little breaks in between can really be useful.
Yeah. Are you also measuring impact and outcomes for professional staff?
So we are not currently measuring impacts and outcomes for professional staff, but that is one of the goals that we are working towards. One thing we have done recently is, within the last few years, we instituted affinity groups for our professionals and staff, which is something that Orrick didn't have previously. The ones that we had were for attorneys. So that is a place that we know we need to do more work on, and that we're working towards. So there are some measurements that are done in terms of pay equity and things like that. But in terms of some of the tracking that we do on leadership and in those places, we aren't as specifically tracking. And it depends on how we're looking at which positions across. But that's a place that we're focused on for the future. And it's one place where we've tried to amp up our efforts, certainly in terms of creating more community and community opportunities in terms of affinity groups and things like that on the staff side as well.
Let's talk about money. How do you address pay equity?
So the way that Orrick does it is we do a privileged pay equity analysis every year, and we, to ensure we're looking at, as we're doing promotions, as we're doing leadership, as we're doing those things, to look at the data. I mean, I feel like that's the way to do it, is you need to look at the data, and that's what we do.
Do you do that for professional staff also, or is that just on the lawyer side?
So that, I will confess, I do not know the answer to that question.
I didn't ask you that in advance.
I know it is on the lawyer side.
Okay.
I confess, I do not know the answer on the staff side.
No worries. The honor roll report expanded this year to include people with disabilities, or in 2022 rather. Do you find that people in the firm are willing to share that information?
So I think we've seen some reluctance, but we have seen folks who are willing to share, and we've tried to create a support network there as well. One of the affinity groups that we added in 2020 was our Diversability Network, which includes both lawyers and staff. And that's one place where we are trying to support people in, if they want to self-identify as being diverse by disability. And I think there's, places where this is one place that the legal profession still has work to do, for sure. And now my understanding is the Mansfield's role is now focused on disability as well. But I think we certainly have folks who are participating, but of course, we don't know exactly what the percentage is to know where the gap is between folks who are self-identifying, who are actively participating in certain of our networks, and who are choosing not to share that information. But I think there's more and more places where we're at least trying to hopefully create a safe space so people feel like they can self-identify if they feel any sort of reluctance. We've done programs on neurodiversity and have some work that we're doing there. And I think we have an instance with our clients too that we've been working with as well, in terms of identifying disably diverse candidates for certain fellowship provisions. And we actually received a lot of feedback from one of our clients who said that they really appreciated that we were putting forward a disabled candidate for this position and including them amongst, as opposed to the diversity metrics that are more commonly looked at. So I think we're trying to create a space where hopefully people feel more and more comfortable. But I think there is still some reluctance, and again, hopefully we can continue to just provide the network that people feel they're getting support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it comes back to seeing the whole person, right? Yes. And honoring the intersectionality, and then recognizing how you can do a little better for each person each day, right?
No, I think that's right. And I think it is, and I think recognizing that our clients care about this too, and promoting that within, so that people understand that our clients are really supportive of disabled candidates as well, and want to see people in those positions, and trying to help support and promote that, hopefully will lead to more and more places where we can. It is, as you said, it's about recognizing the individual regardless of, not regardless of, but looking at them holistically and making sure we are not ignoring segments that we should and can be focused on to help people feel more comfortable and more at home in their work environment.
Is there some magic sauce to receiving the honor roll recognition?
Hard work. I don't know if there's a magic sauce so much as I think I like to think we get this recognition because we are very focused on this, and we put a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of resources behind what we do with respect to diversity. And so I don't know that there's a magic recipe by any means, but I do think it's a recognition that this doesn't happen organically, that it takes paying attention to what's going on, looking at metrics, looking at data, and holding yourselves accountable what's working, to what's not working, and recognizing places where you're not perhaps making the strides that you want to make, and recognizing that there is always more work to do in the places we've talked about today, our staff side, with respect to disabilities, to all of those pieces, to saying we always can do more, and not resting and saying, okay, all right, well, we're good. We've kind of hit these metrics. I kind of take the view of, I love to see all women teams. I love to see all diverse teams. I love to see all that. So, the idea of we're just not having in your mind, you're just hitting certain metrics and that's it, but really thinking about, as you said, how do we best support people individually? How do we advance people individually? And with that, I think comes the ultimate end goal of being able to achieve those goals. But it takes work, it takes effort, and it takes holding yourself accountable.
What's the firm's goal for 2023?
So I think we consistently have 4 goals that we look at in terms of diversity, and how we strive to measure our diversity, which is being most diverse amongst our peers, having the most diverse leadership, having the most diverse partnership, and having the most diverse incoming partner class. So we look at those largely because they are measurable metrics that we can see how we are doing year over year. And hopefully year over year, we're seeing improvements. It's not always necessarily the case, but recognizing in places where it's not, why did that happen in the year? What's going on? What can we do better? And what can we do more? So I think those are really the 4 areas that the firm focuses on. Again, because they are places where we can measure and look at our progress year over year.
What are your personal priorities right now for you and for the Women's Initiative?
So I think one of my biggest priorities right now for the Women's Initiative is really to focus on helping women achieve the highest partnership levels. So have women at the very top of the leadership chain, of the client relationship chain, of the revenue earning chain, and helping women really develop their own books of business. And I think in what we do, ultimately, I think we've talked about revenue per lawyer, revenue per partner, all of those are important metrics. And I think the more that we can help support women in achieving those metrics that are kind of some of the traditional measuring metrics, in addition to what we're doing on the individual support and career development and community building, is all very, very important. Because I think the more we see change is the more we have women advancing up and up and up in their careers, that we have women who are at the highest points that they can reach. And I think I'm very focused on helping women to build their client relationships, to develop their books of business, to have that autonomy, and have that, with that comes power and a powerful voice. And so I think that's a really important goal for me, is to support my partners, but also training folks from junior associates to those business development skills is, I think, a really, really important part of what we do.
This is exactly why at ChIPs we have the Next Gen initiative, and tomorrow we are holding our 2023 mock pitch, which is just an incredible experience. 16 law firm teams, 50 client volunteers, and it's one part training, gaining the skills to pitch a client, and then it's the other part expanding their networks, and it's really fantastic. Does Orrick, do you partner with your BD and marketing teams to help the associates develop those skills and move up to partner and create those connections with clients?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, part of it is partnering with our team, our marketing folks and training folks, to ensure that we're including folks on pitches that are diverse in all of the pitch teams that we do, and that those people have meaningful roles, that we're not doing let's put somebody on a pitch so that we get in the door and the team looks different down the line, but really putting forward those pitch teams that are diverse, of the people who are going to carry that case through trial and be the first chair trial lawyers or be the key associate on that matter. And I think the other piece of it too is we do a lot of trainings. I mean, through the Women's Initiative in particular, we've done a number of trainings where we've had client panels talking about business development. We've had some of our women lawyers who are really just excellent at business development come and give talks on some of their tips and tricks and how to develop your authentic voice and develop your network. And I think there's different, I think in my experience, women network a bit differently than some of the men do, and that's good, and we should embrace that and not think that we have to fit into a particular mold. And so helping people develop their own style of business development. Again, going back to the individual, I think is very important because, what works for one person isn't going to work for another person. So we very intentionally try to bring in folks who think differently about how they develop business. And so we can give associates and junior associates some different approaches that might work for them. Because again, one thing isn't going to work for everyone, and what's successful for one person isn't necessarily going to be successful for another if they don't feel like it's authentic to them. And I think that's, part of the challenge always is you have in business development and networking, it has to feel authentic for you. If it feels fake or forced, you're not going to like it, you're not going to want to do it, and therefore you're not going to do it. And I think people see through it too. I think people recognize when you're not, perhaps not being your authentic self. And so I think giving those opportunities, and so, trying to do not only just trainings, but then create event opportunities where people can go out and practice those skills, right? So let's make sure we're supporting events where we're telling our associates to, okay, we want you to run this client event. So go and gather your folks and invite them to, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just kind of stretching those muscles, right? And developing those skills from early on in your career so you feel more and more comfortable with it is really important, I think.
I've been in several law firms where I've gone down the hall and pulled associates out of their offices and said, you're coming with me.
Yeah.
And every time someone shows up to an event, something magical always happens, and you have to show up, right? And for years, it's been now this transition to this hybrid, and still finding those spaces where you can show up makes a difference. Like you said, you have to own your career. And so you have to get out of your office a little bit and make that initiative and that effort to meet someone else.
I think that's exactly right. And it is. I think there's a nervousness around it too when people first start doing it. So it is, you're exactly right. You have to do it. And once I feel like you do it and you see the outcomes of it, it just encourages you to do it more. So I think, getting those muscles working, feeling like it's a natural thing to do, and feeling like, this is something you want to be engaged in is a really, really important skill set to build from early on.
And ChIPs Next Gen Initiative has a webinar coming up later this fall on how to pitch to win. So all good skills that we're building. I can tell that you have a really incredible team. And I know that a big part of making a difference in the DEI space is access and resources. So what do you recommend to those at smaller firms who don't have the same leverage as a firm like Orrick?
So I think part of it is thinking about partnering with other people who do, or other firms that are, or other organizations that are more of your size, that there can be strength in numbers. But also I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be large scale to be effective. I think a lot of what we've talked about on this call today is a lot of this is individual touch points. And so thinking about, what your priorities are, what your resources are, and leveraging those internal resources first, and then your client resources. I think sometimes it's some of the best opportunities are where you can work with your clients, because it gives you an opportunity to get them to know them better and differently on issues that you're both passionate about. And it allows that cross leveraging of resources to come together on a different project. And so I think there are lots of opportunities to not just think, okay, we're small, we have a small budget. That doesn't mean that you're not able to support people individually, and that you're not able to create those opportunities actually, which can be very, very beneficial, of working with others outside of your organization and expanding that network and building a broader group of folks that can come together and support one another.
I know several general counsel who will say, Monica, I always take the call when I'm asked to meet with a diverse lawyer, because I know that it will make a difference in their career development. Because when it's time for compensation, the firm's looking at, who did you meet with? Who do you know? What's your network? What are your opportunities for business growth? And you mentioned, Sheryl, that the firm looks at, this is something the clients want. What are some of the things you're hearing from clients that they're saying, hey, this is what we'd really like to see? And that something that you've maybe done differently, or pivoted, or partnered with the client even to say, here's what we can co-create together. Because I think it's not just like law firm versus client, but it's really a part of.
No, I think that's right. I think part of thinking of it differently is that, you can be a real partner with your client on these issues. And there are places where, I think actually the corporate to law firm relationship can be really interesting too, because sometimes it is the case that law firms sometimes have more resources and are willing to devote more resources than, because we have, more lawyers than a smaller legal department, for example. So being able to say, okay, we're gonna put on a program that's specifically targeted to our in-house colleagues, that we want to help bring you together to network and create relationships there, and we can help support and facilitate that relationship building. We did a program not too long ago that we had we had a speaker, and then we had some follow-on series of small group discussions around a couple of different books. And it was very nice to be able to bring some of our clients together who were able to address similar situations, but they might be in legal departments where there's one other person who's equivalent to kind of their position, or one person above them. And so they don't have that broader network to say, hey, like, I'm thinking about this issue, how can I best address it? Or what are you seeing in the organization? So I think one thing that was kind of neat that I think we were able to do was create a situation where we could help folks who were similarly situated, but perhaps just in smaller environments, come together and be able to have and facilitate those discussions, which are different from the discussions in a law firm, perhaps, because the advancement track looks different, the opportunities look different. And so I think that's one place where we had heard some feedback of folks just wanting to connect with their peers more. And so I think it was kind of a neat thing for us to be able to do, of facilitate those discussions and allow folks to allow some of our clients to build some networks, just because, we have really great clients, right? We have lots of people that we really like working with. So being able to bring those folks together and say, hey, I think you'd like this person, and I think they're kind of, in a similar situation or experiencing similar issues that you are, was a neat thing that we were able to work on.
It really matters. I hear from in-house counsel every day who are working on their Mansfield certification and looking for ways to improve their in-house team. And so starting with themselves, and then identifying what they're looking for in a law firm and how they want to create that partnership. So we have just a few minutes left. If you could create your dream law firm, what would it need to include? What would that look like?
I mean, in some ways it includes a lot of what I have at Orrick. So I'm really fortunate in that, in terms of a very a supportive environment that allows folks to reach their full potential, that doesn't feel cabined by traditional thinking around what a certain path has to look like. And I think that's where we really see people succeed, is when we give them an environment that allows them to thrive, and we give them the support that they need to do that. And so I think, obviously I love seeing lots of women in leadership, lots of diverse attorneys in leadership, having a place that is very diverse in thought and across all metrics of diversity. I mean, in terms of, we were talking about geography, I think, it's everything that's recognized as traditional protected classes of diversity, but also in the way that the practices that people have, the coasts that they're on, the countries that they're in. I think all of those things make us better lawyers and better able to serve our clients, in terms of not having everyone thinking in the same way. And so I think for me, those are all really important things. And I was fortunate, because a few years ago, I made a choice to move to a different firm. And I feel like I found one that aligned with a lot of what I was looking for in a law firm, in that very team focused environment. I've actually worked with the same two people, both men, for 20 years since I was a first year associate. And the reason that I've worked with them for so long is I feel like I work as really part of a team, that they have my back, I have their back, we work collaboratively, we know all of our clients well, we can step in. It enables you to take a vacation, because I know that one of my partners is 100% capable of just stepping in and taking over for me on a case. And so for me, my ideal part of a law firm is really having that team and feeling like it isn't competitive, right? It's that we are partners and we want to support each other. And when you do well, I do well. And when I do well, you do well. And I think for me, that's the ideal.
Sounds idyllic. You shared this earlier, and I love that you have created this co-sharing almost, right? That it is so collaborative that you have each other's backs, that you can step away for a day or a week on vacation and actually be on vacation and not come back to missed deadlines or whatever, which is not even safe as a lawyer. And I know not everyone has that. And we've had people from the ChIPs community come and speak at programs where they talk about creating job sharing programs. And like you said, you have to own your career. If it doesn't exist already, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, Sheryl has it made, what can I do? You can co-create this. You can say, like, here's what I need in my job. Maybe there's someone else in your firm, in your organization, who wants the exact same thing, who might be able to collaborate with you on creating that. And then make the business case. Talk to people like Sheryl, reach out to your network, find out, how do you do this? How do you create it? What is that like? What do you need to make that successful? And then bring it into your organizations, bring it into your law firm.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, there is an ability to shape what you want your work to look like on a daily basis. And I think part of it too is shaping that, how it looks for you and how it looks for the folks that are coming behind you. Because I think one of the things that's really important too to creating that team environment is, I said, I've worked with these couple of guys for years and they're, peers of mine, but it's the same relationship we have with our associates. Like we ensure that when our associates want to step away and want to go on a vacation, that sometimes, we're covering for them as the partners to make sure that they can do that. And I think if you instill that in folks coming up and make that part of the norm, and that gets spread more and more, it's change can sometimes be slower, sometimes it can be quicker. And I think there's an ability to instill that. And so I think that's one of the things I think we're pretty proud of is, with our teams, like that's not a partner specific thing in terms of having that ability to take some time away, or having that ability to be like, this night my child has an event that I need to be at, and I know we have a filing, but having another team member who's just willing to step in and say, I got you, because I know you're going to have me down the line. And so I think just setting up your teams that way, I think it just expands year over years, and not having it be just necessarily a peer-to-peer relationship in that way either.
So true. Okay, final question. Share one thing that has been most challenging and one thing that has been most rewarding for yourself in doing this crucial work.
So I think most challenging sometimes is just, feeling like you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, through circumstances that are outside of your control, and I think that sometimes is some of the biggest challenge of looking at it and saying, I feel like we've made progress, and then something happens, whether it's a pandemic or otherwise, that you feel like now there's forces at work that weren't at work anymore, and having to reset and say, okay, now how do we deal with this new and different challenge that's in front of us? When I feel like when you're on a path sometimes to feeling like there was success down a particular way, and then resetting at those roadblocks. And I feel like that does happen, certainly in some of it we saw, with the pandemic and folks leaving the workforce and all of that, and having to reset a bit and rethink your goals, and to say, okay, this isn't going to be linear necessarily. It's going to take a different path than you may have expected. I think the things that I'm most proud of, some of them are, very personal. I think actually Lauren Ajemi, I think, is on this call, who was associate I worked for years, and she just was promoted to partner at Orrick. And it was I'm getting a little choked up about it. I was really proud to be able to sponsor her through that journey. And so this year when she made partner, was one of the personally most rewarding things to just have her welcomed into our partnership and at our partner meeting this year, and have her, be on this amazing successful path after this poor woman who I adore. She's been at 2 different firms with me. We left one and came to Orrick, and it's been a journey. And so finally seeing it all pay off and come to, her goal of making partner was really personally rewarding for me.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Sheryl, thank you so much for being part of this program with us, and your commitment to the honor roll, and your Orrick's commitment to ChIPs and Diversity Lab. We really appreciate it. For those who are listening, if you are in-house counsel and you have decision-making authority, identify what you need and partner with your law firms to get the women and the diverse lawyers in the room. And if you're at a law firm, listen to the webinar, find out how you can build those pathways, be the sponsor for someone else. It's just one action you have to do today. It's not everything Sheryl said, it's one thing. I look forward to seeing all you again soon. Thanks to the ChIPs team. And thanks again, Sheryl.
Thanks so much, Monica. This was great. I really appreciate you having me.